Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tuesday, March 17th, 2022. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Milton Board of Appeals. With me are Attorney Jeffrey Mullen and Attorney Nick Gray, panelists on the application for the residences at East Milton property. This hearing closed on March 3rd, and it was scheduled to begin discussions regarding the decision in this case this evening at 5 o'clock, so that we wouldn't be interrupting other business. With us this evening also is Judy Barrett, our consultant, and Sean Reardon. I don't think Mr. Cliff Bomer is present tonight.
I don't think he can.
Okay, maybe he'll sign in later if he can. So the purpose of this meeting is to preliminarily discuss the possible decision in this case and get the board's viewpoint on various issues. We had anticipated that we may have a draft. I should just say as a preamble that we did receive a draft decision from Peter Freeman regarding this project, for which we thank him, and it contains all of the description of the project and findings of fact that he wants the board to make, including various exhibits dealing with technical aspects of the project. And we've had this for a couple of weeks now. Thank goodness Bob Galvin, the attorney for the East Milton Neighborhood Association, read that decision, read Mr. Freeman's draft decision, submitted comments on that decision and some of his own draft conditions that he thinks should be imposed. And that was about the same time as Mr. Freeman submitted his. So we thank Mr. Galvin for his scholarly effort. Both Mr. Freeman and Mr. Galvin are experts in the field, and so we appreciate their technical insights. The board was going to consider preparing a decision of its own for consideration. Judy, let me just ask you, how is that coming along? I know you've been busy of late.
So Sean and Cliff have both given me some comments on the drafts. And there are some errors in the findings of fact. They're not huge, but there are some mistakes. I'm not worried about the procedural history. I'm not worried about the jurisdictional findings. I'm not worried about the findings of fact. I can work with all that. But when I get to here's the decision, I'm not sure where the board wants to go. And so it would be super helpful to me if we could kind of go through the waiver list, which you do all have, but I put it in a somewhat easier, format to read this afternoon. The version we got from the applicant was not very helpful. The type is really small, it's hard to read. So I just blew it up and made it a little more readable. And I tried to then flag on it the things that I think are the deal breakers. Because, for example, if the board said, no, we're not going to grant that height waiver, then I have to back into, so we're changing the number of units we're approving, I assume. I can't write the decision, John, without a sense of where the board wants to go. And I had that sense for 582 Blue Hill Ave. I had that sense for the Ice House, but I don't in this case. So that's why I thought, I don't think drafting the decision is going to be that hard, but I need to know, am I approving a project or am I writing an approval for a project that is substantially as the applicant submitted it, or is the board wanting to resculpt that a bit? And so if you don't mind, unless you have a better way of doing this, I was going to screen share those waivers and just go through them and get your sense of what do you want to do with this waiver request?
Well, let me get a sense of what the board wants to do, because sure. From my perspective, Judy, and very respectfully, you're an acknowledged expert in the field. We appreciate all your efforts and your knowledge. My impression, just as an old trial lawyer who doesn't try these cases, is that we're putting the cart before the horse. and to start discussing minimum lot areas and front yard setbacks and all of those issues is going to artificially craft what decision eventually the board can reach. And it seems to me that what I would prefer, number one, I had thought that what you do is take Peter Freeman's draft decision and use that as the basis, but you don't have to. You suggested to us that you wanted to do your own decision, and that's perfectly fine. You've written probably hundreds of these decisions, so I appreciate that. But my concern is if we start proceeding with conditions, we're going to be making ultimate decisions on the project before we've even discussed the project. And so it was my thought that the proper way of proceeding would be to either discuss your draft decision, which had been reviewed and commented on by both peer review experts, Sean Reardon and Cliff Bomer, or have yourself, Cliff, and Sean review Mr. Freeman's draft decision and proceed on that basis. And I think it would be a much more open process where fundamental issues could be discussed. And then we deal with the waiver list after we've discussed the project and the issues that are separating the parties. And it seems to me that's a more understandable way of proceeding, and just jumping into a bunch of waiver and zoning requirements is, number one, going to be very confusing. And at the end, you'll have 23 decisions and hopefully try to figure out what type of a building you could build with those conditions in full force and effect. And I just think that's the way of proceeding backwards, but I could be dead wrong. I don't have.
That isn't the way we've done the others. And
Okay.
the reason that we've done the others the way we have is that you can't get to what project am I approving if you don't deal with the waiver list. The waiver list is fundamental.
Well, it is fundamental once you decide generally what project you're going to be approving. If you start approving the waiver list to start out with, you're going to be restricting your efforts in what type of decision you're going to be able to render. And it would be very confusing. It would be like putting data into a computer and then having the computer spit out what type of decision you could render based upon that list. And to me, that's not the way, at least I would prefer to proceed. I think it's a confusing way of proceeding, and I think it could be a disservice to the parties. But as I say, I'm not an expert in the field, and let's, Mr. Mullen, do you want to discuss how you think we should be proceeding here?
Yes, my brain was, I was thinking about the decision too. I think it would be helpful for us to get a sense of what the peer reviewers and the experts and the weight of the testimony revealed and what was reasonable under the circumstances, and then consider the waivers. That's where I was. So I was closer to where you are, John, in terms of how this would proceed. That's my sense. I appreciate your point about Blue Hill Avenue, Judy. It felt like
Well, the Ice House was the same way, Jeff. I
turned
mean,
out to be a different hearing, This hearing turned out to be different than that, I guess, in that respect.
so
Jeff, let me ask you this. Are you suggesting that the peer reviewers make comments as to the proposed, the peer reviewers and Judy, obviously, make comments as to the proposed decision that Mr. Freeman has submitted and that Mr. Galvin has commented on
Yeah.
for the benefit of the board?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Oh, that's what I was expecting. I mean, we could have read the decisions, and I thought we were all kind of consolidated. I thought we were getting, a draft decision from the applicant and commented by the abutter, a counsel to the abutters, informed by the peer reviewers, and then we could consider that, and then get kind of a sense of the room, and then consider which of those waivers we needed to do based upon the sense of the room. Yeah.
So I'm not sure how best to help you because the waivers are so essential to what the project is going to be. And I don't know what you want to do with that project. You have, I mean, here's the reality. You have input from your peer review consultants. You have input from the applicant's consultants, and you have input from the neighborhood's consultants, and that's all on the record. And I don't know how the board feels about that testimony. I have no sense at all. I mean, I did with the other cases, so I don't want to be argumentative, but I don't know where your.
Not being argumentative at all. We appreciate your help. I think the issue really is not what everyone thinks the project should be, because you're going to have 5,000 different variations on the theme. The issue from my perspective, and I want to get to Mr. Gray before we get too deeply involved in this, the issue is what the applicant has proposed, and then what the peer reviewers believe with respect to the proposal of the applicant, and not the proposal of the board or the proposal of the East Milton Neighborhood Association. We're dealing with an application here in a project that's been discussed for 13 or 14 different projects. I had thought, speaking very generally, that the applicant here had taken the thoughts of Mr. Reardon and Mr. Ballmer and had revised the project fairly substantially as a result of their conditions. And
Well,
I have a recollection, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that Mr. Reardon had a checklist of maybe 45 or 50 different items. And at the last meeting, he said that the applicants had changed the position and essentially agreed with almost all of his suggestions. And if that's not the case, then I'm misreading the evidence. So if that's the case, the question becomes, what are we discussing? What we think generally, we should be discussing the project. And if Mr. as proposed, and if Mr. Reardon believes that there are other conditions that should be imposed, then we can take that into consideration and vote on it as part of the application. But
so
so
why don't we turn
Can
it
I
off?
ask, can I add something real quick? So in almost every, I think in every 40B I've worked on, which is probably over 50 now, the next process is a discussion of the waivers, because we as reviewers don't necessarily appreciate the or know the town or the board's appetite for granting relief to particular waivers. So we can say, yes, the applicant has provided all the information needed to sort of present a permittable and a constructible project, but that the applicant has assumed relief that they're requesting. So now is the appropriate time to sort of discuss each of those requested areas of relief and sort of figure out where we're comfortable granting relief, where we might not be comfortable granting relief, make sure we understand kind of what we're doing when we grant that relief, and then let that sort of work through the process a little bit to just better inform, again, the decision. And then we go about.
Sean, are you going to take each one of these items and discuss with us the relevance on the project as proposed? Is that what you're suggesting doing? Because we're not engineers, and I think if you do that, we're going to be here for 2 or 3 nights doing that, but maybe that's what's required.
Well, frequently what happens is you sort of, 90% of them fall out routinely, and you end up sort of circling around, 1 or 2 that are sort of contentious issues. And then we sort of craft a decision on that particular waiver that people feel is on point. Yeah, literally, John, what we do is we at the end of the public hearing process, we literally go through every waiver. Well, sometimes we keep the hearing open, but go through every waiver and then make sure everybody understands what's being waived. And usually it revolves around the applicant asks for blanket waivers.
Yeah.
And we try to tailor it even more, again, to sort of protect as much of the infrastructure that exists within the town bylaws and within the town regulations that you can still rely on going forward, and don't waive it
but you don't necessarily know that they need a blanket waiver, but it's just a lazy way of doing it. And so I would be presumptuous if I assumed that the board was comfortable granting these waivers.
Yeah, same with
Even if the
me.
peer review consultant said it's fine. Technically, I don't know that it's fine from the board's point of view, which Sean is absolutely right. There are some waivers in some communities where boards are not comfortable granting them. For precedent reasons or whatever, and I don't know what those are.
I don't think we did that at Brush Hill Road.
We went through the waivers,
Yeah.
went through the waivers before the hearing closed.
We
to make
did.
sure
No,
the
but I-
board-
We
I
did
know.
that.
Yeah.
We did that as part of the hearing. But we
Yeah.
didn't start out our deliberations with the waivers. Started out with the decision.
I knew by the time that hearing closed, Jeff, where the board's head was.
Okay. But I'm just saying that Sean, that might have been your experience on every other one, but the one that you and I did together, that's not what we did. So that was informing. That's what I thought we were doing here. And that's what I've been thinking about, so.
So Jeff, correct, so it was a while ago, sorry. Did we, so we were still in the public hearing when we went through the waiver list?
We had a night where we did the waivers, yeah.
And we had a decision in our hand at the time? Was that? how-
It's a draft decision in place underway.
I mean, we're
I
not
don't
far
know.
from-
We were talking about the way, I mean, in that case, and this is not about that hearing, but they were looking for waivers for, street occupancy permits and things like that we just weren't going to do, but
That's the
things
point,
like
though.
that.
That's.
But that was part of hearing.
Yeah, maybe a bit of a chicken and egg thing or it's done simultaneously thing. I just know I feel sort of I need to hear from the board what their feelings are on particular waivers because you represent the town and
Why do you think the board would want to make that type of determination without hearing from you in the first place? Since the board are a bunch of lawyers from Boston who know nothing about engineering and, as I've said previously, couldn't
that's why I thought I was here to help you in that process.
conduct a doghouse in their backyard.
So can I give you guys an example? I can think of a case I worked on in another community where the peer review consultant said, the height really is fine on this building. The neighborhood's not happy with it, but the height is really fine and it works for the following reasons. But in the end, the board said it's too much. From our perspective, and it was another board of lawyers, so you can't get off on that one, but
It was
it's-
another project we were
it's too
involved in.
much. It's too much. It's just too much relief. It's not what our town would typically do. That's going beyond what our town would typically do. So the peer review consultant said, one thing, technically it's okay, but the board said, this is as a matter of policy, this is not okay in our town. So that then helped me understand where the board was coming from. And I don't know where we are.
The board is going to tell you at the appropriate time when it's comfortable and where it's coming from, but it needs the input of the peer reviewers before we can do that. For example, is Sean going to tell us that these conditions, in his opinion, or which of these conditions, in his opinion, would be inconsistent with the allowance of the application as sought by the applicant? So if Sean is going to say, on my checklist, I've agreed that the applicant has made 60 changes to this project, and that all of the requests for changes that I've made are in conformity with my review, then the question is, if you board members are going to allow this building as proposed, then these variance, these waiver dimensional requirements are fine. Or if some of them are inconsistent with the project as proposed, then maybe they changed. So I think what the ultimate issue here is whether in view of, and Sean, I'm sorry to make an example of you because you're a great engineer, but if your opinions based upon your peer review are consistent with those of the proposal that Mr. Freeman has submitted to us here, then the question is, which of these conditions is inconsistent with the proposed project, and why, and then we can make decisions based upon that. But it seems to me, without the project being assumed to be in compliance with the peer review opinions, then we're going about the process the wrong way. But
Maybe-
let me
maybe-
do.
But I think we already have the peer review opinions.
Well, we do, and as far as I can see, and what Mr. Freeman says in this draft report, is that his application is consistent with the peer review opinions, and if that's so,
There's a-
that,
There's a
And-
few embellishments in it, but that's all right.
well, maybe that's so, then maybe we should discuss what those differences are and use that as part of the basis for the decision. But let me get Mr. Gray involved here, so we have Nick's input. Mr. Gray, do you want to be heard on this issue?
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. I think that I'm very sensitive to what Judy and Sean are advising us to do, this being the first project that I've sat on. And so I give a lot of weight to the order that in which they want to attack the problem. But thinking about it in my own, from my perspective, having read both of the draft decisions, it seems to me that the main issue, the one that will be the greatest sticking point, concerns the number of units and the height of the building. And if we had a sense of the board as to what we think is the answer to either of those questions, that would inform our ability to be able to opine on what the waivers are. I feel like if you're
Right.
asking me if the building to grant a waiver is to 6 stories, I don't really know the answer to that until we've decided if we think 92 units is feasible in this location for health and safety reasons, or that's kind of where I'm coming from. So
And you're right.
if we I don't know whether it's appropriate, but to have a general discussion as to what as to what we think, if that is indeed the major stumbling block with this project. In my view, from the beginning of it, in just looking at the project as a whole, knowing the East Milton neighborhood from living in the town for, I don't know how many years, 40, 50 years, a long time. I could have told you from the beginning that the project seemed to be like trying to squeeze too large a building onto too small a lot in light of the traffic concerns and in light of the parking issues in that part of town. And the shading of the lots is the nearby properties is also an important consideration in my view. I just feel like we're trying to, if we approve the project as the applicant has proposed, we're sticking an immense building in the middle of East Milton that's going to shade the neighborhood and will create, just by common sense, a burden on that area that is already overburdened in terms of traffic. Does that rise to the point of safety? I think arguably it might, but I feel like we need to have a discussion on those issues first, maybe, in order to inform how we attack the waivers. And I may be wrong in that, and I'm happy to listen to you guys talk about it, but it seems to me that that's the key, the major sticking point.
And where do you suggest, Nick, without putting you on the spot, that opinions as to health, safety, environmental concerns, or design concerns are such that they may outweigh the need for regional housing? Are those opinions that you'd expect from our expert peer reviewers?
I think it's our job to listen to what our peer reviewers say, listen to what the applicants say, their consultants say, and then make our judgment weighing what each of them has said. We give weight to not the veracity of it, but we have to, surely the board has to take into account has to weigh what weight to give to each of that testimony. Not that they aren't believable, but I just feel like we need to I don't know, consider what the overall impact is. And I know we're because of the statute and the regulations they're under, we're working in a very restricted box with what we can and can't do.
Right.
And I understand that. And I understand that if we made if we impose conditions that the developer feels is going to render the project uneconomic, that's going to create a long set of issues. On that point, I would just say that we didn't discuss, and I don't recall having been presented evidence as to the economic viability of this project in terms of how many units it would be that would be viable until the very end of the evidence. And after the hearing had been extended many, many times, the applicant was thus unhappy to extend it further. And if, for example, we decided that the size of the project was too big and we needed to make a significant reduction in the number of units in order just to make it viable for the people who are living in that area, we would need to, there was no opportunity for us to have the financials peer reviewed, right? Wasn't that something that we were entitled to? And because we weren't granted an extension, we weren't able to get that. And so
There's a way that
Judy,
that
what do you
works.
want? Yeah,
Just so you know, because we've talked about this before. You may request a review of financial feasibility if you ask the applicant to make a change in the project and the applicant says, I can't do that, it's going to make my project uneconomic. And once the applicant makes that claim, then the board can, say, we want to have a financial peer review. I think the applicant may have been aware that the board might have wanted that. I can't speak for Attorney Freeman and his clients, but I don't think there was much interest in allowing that to continue. So you can ask for a peer review. That doesn't mean they necessarily have to agree to it.
okay.
And
Well,
so
yeah.
I think you're kind of stuck now with, the applicant wasn't willing to allow that to go forward. I think they probably felt like the hearing had gone on long enough,
I agree with that. I think they probably felt that.
But you are in that position now where, you have to make some judgment calls about the financial feasibility issue, or just say, or the other response may be, well, maybe it is going to make the project uneconomic, but this is too much for our town. I'm not saying that's what you should say. I'm saying that boards will make those kinds of decisions because from their perspective, based on what they know about land use policy in their town and past decisions and so forth, they think something simply is wrong. And you have a right to make that call. I think that if you kind of go through the waivers and think about, well, they're asking for this, so what does the record tell us about why we should grant this? Is this necessary? That's typically a way that this would be done. And so I think you've got plenty of written peer review comments. I don't think you are missing anything there, but I think it's definitely now a situation where the board has to give us some direction. What do you want to do? And Nick, I think you're on the right track in terms of the path that you're trying to follow.
Okay.
Judy, if I could add, the reason why I think reviewing the waivers is helpful in that exact deliberative process is because, for example, if in the course of reviewing the waivers, you realize you're only waiving from a 60-foot zoning height to 61 feet, it sort of informs your decision making. And for us, the people that help you craft the decision in the end is what I need to do is get a sense as to where the waivers are going to land so that I can understand what protections need to be maintained, because protections that used to exist were lost when a particular passage is waived or something like that. So I think more than anything, it's the waiver process is just a sort of a helpful sort of nudge. Reviewing the waivers is a nudge in the direction of deciding these things and sort of getting rid of the easy ones, swiping them off the plate, and then focusing on the big issues with the right sort of contextual understanding.
Right.
Do it.
All right. So for example, we would in discussing the waiver for the height, we might discuss the number of units. Is that appropriate?
Yeah, I would just say, bear in mind, the applicant provides that your scope of authority, your jurisdiction is public health, public safety, environmental impact, site and building design, and open space. So it doesn't say density, and I'm stressing this for you. I'm stressing this for you because the issue is the physical impact of that building on the surrounding area and not whether it has 90 units or 62.
Yeah, the number of unit, I don't care if it has 225 units, if the infrastructure, the road system in the area could
Yeah.
support that size. And it's not the number of units that concerns me, it's the ability of the East Milton neighborhood and the town as a whole, and in fact, the region, because to be able to support the number of units that and the traffic that's going to result from that, the parking issues, the delivery issues, those to me are the most important factors that go towards what size project that this site can support. The groundwater is an issue, but I rely on Mr. Reardon's interpretation of the stormwater system and the sewer system, and I think we can reach an agreement on the neighborhoods. I think we can figure that part out. But the harder issue for me is purely deciding what is a reasonable size project for health and safety.
Yeah,
Right.
but Nick, hasn't our traffic been already weighed in on that issue? And essentially signed off on the project to the best of them?
Yeah, I know. And so this is where I'm saying, don't we get an opportunity as board members to determine whether or not we agree with that assessment? I know that this is what one expert says, this is what the other expert says, but we have to decide as the board what weight to give that evidence.
Right, but where does it come down without being overly specific? If you've got two experts saying essentially the same thing, that the project is feasible from a traffic standpoint.
I understand. I still think it's a discussion we need to have.
I agree.
Yeah, and what I would say, and to color that discussion, is that a lot of my testimony revolved around, yes, something is doable, but whether it's advisable is something else, right? So for example, my sort of misguided comparison to the north end, right? That, yeah, there are ways around everything when something's built and you can get creative. The question is whether or not that's acceptable to the board as a potential outcome. And I think, some of the things we talked about, the lack of access to the interior, the question regarding parking, the questions regarding other things, the constructability issues are all sort of gray area stuff for us that really, I wish I could make a decision for you and just say, if I were in your shoes, I would do this, but that's beyond my control. So what I try to do is just make you aware of the potential eventualities, and then hopefully you guys can get enough information from that to make a decision.
But Sean, in the ultimate, isn't it the fact of whether you believe, based upon your training background and experience, your review of the applicant, the application, and the submittals with the application, that for example, that the density issue is such that it's not a subject that relates to health, safety, environmental or concerns of design. And therefore, it wouldn't be, even if you thought it was too dense, that legally speaking, as long as they meet the statutory criteria, then the board has to deal with the project and allow it. In other words, we can't get together, I think, and say, well, we think 50 units. Yeah, three lawyers think 50 units is the best way to do this.
Yeah, we would never put it in those terms, John. It's never a question of units. It's always a question of impacts.
Right.
And in this case, the impacts are sort of well documented, and the risks are well documented in terms of construction risks and things like that.
Sure, but isn't it true? And for example, the traffic one that Nick suggested. So I get you outside of your own discipline. If the issue is whether the project as proposed is going to pose risks to the neighborhood dealing with health or safety such that those concerns outweigh the regional housing need here. And we have a traffic expert who says that the interest of traffic is properly handled and doesn't adversely affect health or safety as proposed by the applicant. And the applicant's traffic expert says essentially the same thing. How can we disagree with them? How can we say you have to go to?
I'm not sure that's what the record says, but Sean, I'll defer to you.
Yeah, I think, John, you've characterized it properly. The question is, are there things outside of a standard traffic assessment, which is the standard that's being applied by these professionals, that fall within your purview? And I would consider traffic associated with construction,
Yeah.
the staging of material on the street, the potential for risk to pedestrians from construction vehicles. These are things that are not covered as part of a traffic impact assessment. They're all forward-looking things that are tools based on an occupied facility. So that it's that nuanced gray area that you guys have to work in that we don't, which is good for us because we have a sort of a rigid set of framework that we follow. But what it does is it's silent on the more nuanced stuff, which I think is the sort of the major struggle that you guys have to deal with.
Well, you make us sound like we're seers or swamis or something after you've all opined. I mean, I'm not going to ask you to answer this, but I'd normally ask you, in light of what you said, please recite from your study of the project in your multiple reports on the project, which of those factors that you considered that relate to health, safety, environmental concerns, or design that you believe outweigh the regional housing needs for this project. And I'd be thrilled to hear that answer. And once I hear that answer, and I've asked that similar question to our architect, then I think a lot of these issues will be solved. Because you'll only have 2 or 3, but maybe you'll have 10, I don't know. And then we can deal with the waivers. But until you've done that, as far as I can see, based upon your reports, and I'm not an engineer, you're essentially suggesting that as proposed, this project does promote local concerns. And it is in fact meets the criteria so that the regional need for housing should prevail. So
John, the peer review consultants never comment on the regional
Yeah.
need for housing. That's not their job. Their job is to identify.
oh, yeah, but is it their job, Judy, to discuss how this project adversely affects, if it does, health, safety, environmental concerns, or design concerns?
That's their job, right? But it falls to the board. It's
Right,
the
but-
board that has to conduct that balancing test, not the peer
I
review.
understand that, but the expert has to first pronounce what he believes those matters are. And from everything I know, I didn't think that Mr. Freeman was stretching very much when he said that Sean's report on health, safety, environmental, or design were that the project met those needs. No, I can ask him that here and now if we have to, but you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I can, John, I can say comfortably that there are no apparent issues related to health and safety for the subject matter that I reviewed that remain at this point. Now, there are things that I've sort of alluded to during my testimony that still remain a concern for me that we'll do as best we can to manage through the course of a decision, and that's construction activities and things like that. So I'm comfortable saying that there is nothing outstanding that I consider a risk to public health other than normal routine risks that people endure every day that may be heightened during the course of construction or as a result of the project, but aren't created by the project.
Okay, And so if that's the case, then if we reviewed the so-called waiver list, would you say, without getting involved in the detail of each one of them now, that the proposal as provided is consistent with your findings dealing with health, safety, and concerns? Or are there some waivers that we should deal with more specifically and allow in part, or maybe disallow in part? I don't know where we go with that.
I admittedly, I looked at the waiver list and I was confused by it, and
Oh,
didn't-
yeah. too.
it wasn't as organized as it traditionally is. So my biggest concern regarding the waivers is that the regulations in town provide a lot of protection against potential negative outcomes that aren't part of design.
Mhm.
And, I'm thinking about just construction management, I'm thinking about stormwater connections and things like that. So to the extent that any of those local bylaws are waived, that's where I focus my attention, to make sure that the wording of that specific waiver, through that wording of that specific waiver, you don't lose protections that otherwise
Would be there.
in place. So I would craft a condition that makes sure it holds on to the things that you might have lost.
Mhm.
Yeah, and to the local concern, and wouldn't you, under that circumstance, Sean, if halfway through the waiver list, we come across some item that fits within that category, you would want the opportunity to confer with the building commissioner, Joe Prondak, or some other town official, to make sure that the town's concerns with respect to that waiver are not waived, but are protected.
Yeah, or craft a decision that does exactly that. It
Right.
provides the protection in lieu of the regulation.
That's what the conditions do.
So,
Guys, I'm sorry, I have a hearing in Abington that's actually in person, so I have to get going. But I'll circle back with Judy tomorrow and make sure that, she tells me everything. I apologize.
okay.
I may see you in Abington. I may see you later.
Oh, okay, all right. See ya.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you, Sean.
Well,
I mean, I'll tell you what I can do. I can take Peter's draft, clean it up a little bit.
Yep.
Do a little bit of editing in some of the findings, because I do have some input from Cliff and Sean. It's not big stuff, but just want it to be accurate as to what they represented. But when I get to the conditions of approval, there are going to be some blanks in it, because I can't write some of the conditions that need to be written without input from the board. And the number one decision, the number one condition I can't write is the very first one. The project shall be, shall not exceed X number of units, which shall be X number of 1, X number of 2, X number of 3. The height shall not exceed X. I can't write, I'm going to have to leave those blank until I get input from you folks. Are you okay with the waivers the applicants requested? Because if you are, then I can fill those blanks in.
I think that's fine. I think
Okay.
that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
I actually can't say too much about the way. I don't think the waivers are only a couple of pages. There's not a lot there, I think that would work, Judy. I don't know. I'm gonna let Nick in. That provides us the context to fill in the blanks,
I can do that. It just,
Yeah.
in a way, feels like I feel like I'm not giving you much except the shell of a decision, because the basic content that needs to be there that determines whether this gets appealed to the HAC or the Superior Court won't be in that decision. It'll be blank.
well, Judy,
They'll have to wrestle with those things.
Judy, you're an experienced young lady in this area.
I'm
And
so young.
you understand as we do, that an appeal of this decision based upon the present record is inevitable. It's inevitable.
Yeah, I mean, one way or the other, I'm sure, yeah, I
You
suspect
bet
so.
it is. And so whether it gets appealed or not, while an appeal is unfortunate,
Mhm.
the way this process has been legally designed, not by you, obviously, the way these hearings get conducted, the way that the Housing Appeals Committee operates is not judicial, it's not official, it's artificial. And I don't think it's a very helpful process. It leads to destructive tendencies by all parties. But that's, you have to take what you're dealt and with the process that you're in. So don't fret that somebody's going to be disappointed with what the board does, because in all probability, on a contested application like this, both sides are liable to be
It's very
concerned.
possible. It's very possible, John, very possible.
And so worrying about that will get us nowhere. And that's really not of much concern to the board.
And, yeah, I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
No, all I'm saying is our concern is that we have expert opinions and peer reviewers that we can rely on, and that we can learn from them what effect granting these various waivers need after the board has made a determination based upon the applicant's submittal. And I think that's where I really rest my case, because it's really not the function of this board to design buildings of affordable units in East Milton Square. And it's not what we wish, what we want to have happen. The perfect example is I spent most of the afternoon reading the Looking Forward to East Milton Square and reading what it says about East Milton Square, what it was like in the 1940s, what it's like in the 1960s, and what it's like now and what it should be. I'm not going to spend any time dealing with that now, but I think that is reflective of reality in East Milton Square, whether people like it or they don't like it. And likewise, whatever influences the need for regional housing needs in Milton is defined by statute, and it's defined by 40B and what those objectives are. It's not the Board of Appeals function to start rewriting 40B or rewriting the regulations or rewriting the decisional law that has come down on these 40. It's to apply these in a fair and honest way.
Agreed.
As
Agreed.
proposed by the applicant. And that's where we have to vote. And we may disagree on how high this building should be and how many units this should be. And that's for the board to decide. So I think from my perspective here, I still think it is not advisable to be discussing waivers before we discuss the project in more detail. I agree with Mr. Mullen. I think it would be helpful. We're not asking you to decide the case for the Board of Appeals. We have no problem deciding the case based upon our discussions and how we view the evidence. But it's not our personal preferences that we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the advice and recommendations of our peer reviewers, both of whom are, or all of our peer reviewers, all of whom are superb in my viewpoint and have written in great detail on this project. So I think it would be indeed very helpful if you could put together a draft decision as you suggested, leaving ultimate decisions to the Board of Appeals, and we're not looking for you for decision-making or anything, but something that that you feel is you'd be more comfortable with as a consultant than the draft that Mr. Freeman has proposed. And then we'll work off of your draft and decide some of these issues.
So Nick, I just want to mention one thing. When you were talking about the number of units earlier, and I said, well, density is not what the statute talks about, it's site and building design. I think in this case in particular, one way where the density really does become a factor is the parking,
Absolutely.
you know, and that's something which,
Parking and Judy and deliveries, right?
yeah, yes, right. Yeah,
And
access.
I keep going back to one of my teachers in high school who had the phrase, the firm grasp of the obvious. And I was always accused of having a firm grasp of the obvious. But what I mean is, I think we have great consultants and they've done a wonderful job reviewing the project and telling us what they believe in their judgment, the impacts would be, the effects. But we have our own experience of the area, of the environment, and a sense of what is safe, you know, and for example, the design, and maybe I'm going off the rails again, but the design doesn't, in my view, provide an adequate solution to the problem of deliveries. Okay, anyone who drives or walks, goes through East Milton Square at any point in time can see delivery trucks parked all over the place, blocking the road, right? So we know that that is a safety issue. It impedes the flow of traffic, it impedes the movement of emergency vehicles, and it creates sightline problems for pedestrians trying to cross the street, or for, God forbid, a driver trying to make a left turn onto Franklin from Adams Street. So it's obvious to anyone, it's common sense that there needs to be provision in the site for the safe and frequent delivery of packages and items and stuff to the truck. That's the way this society is moving now. Is
Yeah, I know.
delivery of stuff, and we just can't create a project that it burdens. I mean, the immediate impact would be on East Milton, but honestly, the traffic would progress, you know, outwards into Quincy and whatever. We just can't approve something that's going to create a problem for everyone going forward. I think that the site needs to accommodate easy on and off access for the delivery of materials to the site.
Mhm.
And the building is taking up so much of that space that there's, in my view, no adequate provision for it. I know you're supposed to turn around and you park, but even that, the parking of that turnaround inside there assumes the truck can fit underneath the
I know.
overpass, can
Yeah.
make all of the turns, that no one has parked illegally or out of place. That, you know, everything has to fall in perfectly in order for the deliveries to work. And we know that we don't live in a perfect world. It's not going to happen. So there needs to be, in my view, wiggle room. You know, there has to be, the design has to take into account the real world, that it's not going to work perfectly, and it has to be able to handle that. So that's, I mean, I'm going probably too far down the road of what I really think
No.
about it, but that to me is affecting, that is a site concern.
Yep.
I don't care about the density. What I care about is having enough space on the site to have traffic, you know, deliveries come on and off the property in a smooth manner, and people being able to get in and out of the building, you know, with their
Nick-
cars in a smooth and easy manner.
You
And it's
think,
going to be a freaking nightmare the way that's put together right now. I
Nick,
mean, it's common, it's just obvious.
Nick,
Yeah.
you think that Mr. Reardon hasn't taken that into consideration
I-
in his reports? And in
I
his,
think that, I don't know. I mean, I assume he has, but
we should read them and ask them.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I think going to the Housing Appeals Committee with the fact that the building doesn't accommodate deliveries very well is not going to be much of a concern to the Housing Appeals Committee.
Unless
Something that
there's a
involves
safety
health
issue.
or
Unless-
safety. I just
yeah,
don't
unless-
see it.
Right, but that's the question, you know, is there a safety issue? And all I'm saying is, I think Nick is at least having the kind of discussion that I'm used to hearing when we get to this point in a case, which is, we have all this input, but we also know the town, we know the area. Does this make sense? That's a perfectly appropriate conversation for the board to have.
Yes. And
I
ju-
don't know that
I
the
wish-
record is all that clear on that matter.
I wish Sean was with us so we could discuss that issue. That's why we're having this hearing tonight, but he's off to some other meeting. So we can't discuss that issue. But I do think that that is the way the issues that Nick has raised and that Jeff will raise are the type of issues. They may be determinative, they may not be, but they're the type of issues that we should be discussing as part of a draft decision on this case, and with our experts available so that we can ask them precise questions and then make a decision. And
I do think that, but this came up in the hearing. I mean, this was discussed in the hearing. And I think that their opinions are on record. I don't think this is the point when we want to be asking the consultants for essentially new input. It's already on the record. Because if we're
Well,
starting to have a
but-
discussion about new input here, then no one else has an opportunity to comment on that.
We're not asking for new input. We're asking for what his opinion is on the delivery to the building. And if we can't ask the experts that type of issue, then that there are 10,000 questions we could ask, and we're not going to be able to ask them. In other words, we want, that's just the type of issue that we want to ask Mr. Reardon, what his opinion is on that, so we'll know exactly what it is.
I think it's already documented in his memo.
Well, you tell me what it says and where is it? I don't have it in front of me. I'd have documents to the ceiling in my office if I had all of that stuff. He should have his own materials ready and be able to answer those questions. That's the purpose of these discussions. Is it not? Is it what the board remembers that some experts said on the 11th hearing or on the 7th hearing? That's crazy. Nobody can remember that. We remember the subject being discussed. We remember modifications that he asked for. We remember modifications being made. Are they adequate modifications or are they not? That's the questions we want to ask. And I think those are sensible issues to discuss, and we can agree or disagree. But that's part of the record, but do you think people out there in the TV land can remember what Mr. Reardon said on that particular issue, and whether the spaces were properly arranged and whether the pathways were the right way? He made several suggestions and alternatives, and I thought the applicant came back with some additional changes in that direction. I'd like to ask him, what did the applicant propose in response to your changes, and what is it adequate for concerns of safety? And maybe if we have our experts here, we can benefit from their opinions and make some progress.
Do you want to reschedule to a night that Sean and Cliff can be here?
Yes, if they can do it in the next couple of weeks. If we start going over every 4 weeks, we're not going to be able to meet our deadlines.
No, I understand that.
Um,
So, fortunately, you don't have to announce that tonight because this is deliberation at this point. It's a meeting. It's not a hearing. So I need to be able to communicate with them about their schedules, and I certainly can't do that right now because at least one of them, actually, I think both of them are in hearings tonight. So I'll have to get back to you as to when they can be available. And I think what I might ask both of them to do is just to, from their various memos that they've given you, which are, on file, is there anything they consider that's still outstanding that perhaps we should be dealing with in a condition of, of approval or whatever, but I could certainly do that.
I think that'd be very helpful. I think that would be very helpful because Mr. Freeman in his application and in his submittal thinks that our peer reviewers are in essential agreement with their proposals as revised over the period of the hearing process. So if they're not, I'd like to know that. But I'd also like to know, just for planning purposes, I don't know when they're available, but when the board members are available, so you'll know,
course, of
that
course,
would be very helpful.
of
So,
course.
Jeff, how's your schedule next week?
Do we have to meet at 5?
I don't have any nights open next week, so, but I may not be the most important person in this discussion. I just don't have any nights open next week. I've got hearings and zoning in 5 towns for town meeting, and I just don't have any nights open. Not trying to be difficult.
Well, I can tell you from my schedule, I'm available the 22nd, which is next Tuesday. I have a hearing on Randolph Avenue. No, there is a hearing on Randolph Avenue on the 23rd.
That's correct.
The 24th, I'm available, which is a Thursday. The Friday, the 25th, I'm available, and I'm available the following Monday, the 20th.
About the 21st, John? No?
No, I have a 16 Amer Road hearing.
I could do it on the 22nd or the 24th.
So could I?
I can't do any of them. I
Well,
have
you're
I
leaving.
have hearings. The 21st, the 22nd, the 23rd, and the 24th, I think.
Yeah.
Even though I. Oh. Even if it's not me, and I will partake as much, as long as I can. I believe I have. I have 16 Amor the 21st, Canton Ave the 22nd.
Right.
The 23rd is
It's Randolph.
728 Randolph.
I'm on that one.
Yeah.
and the 24th. Might be available.
Okay, so Bev and Jeff, how about Nick? How about you for the 24th?
The
John, I think
24th, I'm available on the 24th.
I can do the 24th as well, but I think one question is, will we have a draft by then?
Well, I don't know, but certainly.
I can give you a draft, sure. As I said, it'll be a lot of blanks, but I can do that.
Okay.
Well, I think we should at least schedule the 24th and see what progress we can make. And I tell you, when I get into the following week, I have no availability. So,
Okay, the 24th is definitely available.
Okay.
Okay,
What
So-
time?
7's better for me,
Yeah,
just better.
Agreed.
yeah, but
Yeah.
how about you?
and 7's available. I mean, that's the best time for everybody. I know Judy's very, very busy.
I won't be
This-
present, but I
this
can.
5
direct
o'clock.
you.
This 5 o'clock is a tough one.
Well, how about how about
Mr.
10,
Seven,
how about 10 o'clock in the morning?
No way.
What prohibits it? No?
Four-way HOAG. I mean, that's just crazy for me. No
Mm.
way. I
Okay.
can't do that.
Well, I thought it may be easier for you.
I
No,
can't.
no. This is all,
Okay,
I gotta,
you got to practice around, right, Jeff?
What do you say, 7 o'clock next Thursday?
Well, we need Cliff and Sean there, right, Judy?
I will communicate with them tonight.
And then-
Sean, I think I'm gonna see Sean tonight. And I have pretty much easy text access to Cliff, so I'll find out if they're available.
Are they
Yeah,
more
just
like,
email me, Judy.
I will, and I don't know what Tim's
Yes.
schedule is next week either, so. No, I think you should go ahead and meet at a time that works for you guys, and I'll let you know who's available.
Who's Zoom? Why is your hand up?
Where?
It's an attendee with a hand up and you can't.
Well, Judy, I know that, but Zoom is normally,
I have no idea.
Oh,
no,
it's flashing now.
what Zoom is Milton Access. That's
Oh,
what I'm asking.
okay. Sorry.
Disregard.
Yep.
Okay,
No,
Well, I just didn't know
webinar
if they
two,
wanted to
webinar
say
two is, apologies,
Thank you,
webinar
John. What's
2
going on?
is us at MATV.
It's
I don't,
Tim. It's Tim.
Judy,
I
just a
got-
sec, just a sec. Milton Access needs to talk. What's up, Sean?
hello,
Sean, do we have a problem with Thursday?
Yeah.
Sean? All right, I have no idea, so I don't know, let's just book it. Somebody has gotten the Board of Appeals web, the Zoom number, which is what happened last night. And I'm not sure, but I'm gonna fix that, so let's just do next Thursday. Okay,
okay, so we're gonna go over to Thursday, the 24th at 7 o'clock. I think,
Can I just interrupt for a sec? Tim is sending me text messages saying that Zoom is he, rather, excuse me, pardon my grammar. It's he. So I can just tell you that that's what he's telling me. I can't.
well, can't we? Can't we?
yeah,
let
yeah,
the person
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm here.
Hello,
Doesn't look like you, Tim.
Sorry, everybody. So I really apologize. I had to go set up the Community Preservation Committee meeting under Zoom One, which is a town license. And so I'm still signed in as Zoom One, but I'm out of that meeting. This is handsome Bob Bushway. Has
That's
a
Bob. I
headshot
thought
for,
so.
I don't know why Zoom One has Bob Bushway's photo, but it's, it's a good one. I apologize for that. I don't really have much control over what my display name is when I'm juggling these meetings. The one thing I wanted to say is the 24th is probably fine. I have there's a planning board set of public hearings on that day. I'm short-staffed because my assistant director left last week. So I may need to kind of jump between hearings, but I think if Judy's not going to be able to be there, I'm going to want to make it a priority to be around to give you all an assist. So it may be a little bit back and forth, but I can make that work.
That's it.
okay, thank you, Tim, that's helpful. Well, I think we have no choice but to go over to the 24th. I'm apprehensive about conducting the hearing without Judy.
I'll see if I can change my schedule.
And it would also be very, very helpful if we could have Cliff and Sean present, but if we can't, we can't. I'm just concerned that the issues here, maybe once we break the back of several issues, everything falls into place. But I'm concerned about being at a meeting at 11 o'clock on April 11th to try to get things done. But with that as a proviso, Judy's packing up, so we'll go.
John, may I interrupt?
Sure, of course you can.
Thank you. First of all, Judy, because of the problems lately we've been having with the webinar, I thought Sean was interrupting that something was coming up for next week. So, and secondly, we have Joe. So Joe and Crystal my replacement, joined in tonight because Joe and I wanted to introduce her. And so that's why they're on. And before we close, can I give Joe the table here?
Yeah, sure you can, of course.
Well, thank you, Bev, and good evening, members, Chairman, and Jeff and Nick and Judy and Mr. Bushway. So I just two things. I'd like to formally introduce Ms. Crystal Rich. She's going to be the new clerk to the new clerk to the zoning board. And Paige Eppolito, our human resources director, and I did an extensive search and found that Ms. Rich was the best candidate for the job, and I think she's going to do an awesome job. So I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank Ms. Beverly Sutton, who's done a phenomenal job for the Board of Appeals over the years, and her talents will be missed. So Ms. Rich has some big shoes to fill, but I'm sure she's quite capable. So that's all I've got.
Well, welcome to the Board of
Welcome
Appeals.
aboard.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Bev. I look forward to working with everyone, and it's nice to meet you.
Good to meet you too.
So Judy, you'll talk with our consultants and check your schedule. And as I say, I'm concerned about meeting in your absence, but if we have to do it, we have to do it.
I can probably join you for at least an hour, John. The meeting that I have that night is at 7:30, and if I can kind of arrange their agenda accordingly, I probably can be available at least until 8. So let me see what I can do.
That'll be, we appreciate that very
I'm
much.
meeting season.
Maybe
everyone.
we'll be done by 8, Judy. Who knows?
Yeah, right. That's right.
Yeah, there are so few issues to discuss, so
Yeah,
Nick may be ready. That's
Oh, Nick.
have it all worked out.
Okay, so without further ado, we'll go over to March 24th at 7 PM for further deliberations of the board on this particular application, and I wish everyone a pleasant week to come. And Judy, we look forward to receiving your draft decision, even if it has a lot of holes in it.
Okay.
All right?
Thank
Happy
you,
St.
everyone.
Patrick's Day.
Okay, go. Same to you.
John, just before we go.
Yeah, Jeffrey,
just,
yeah.
just
Mr.
wanna-
Milton.
welcome, Crystal. You have big shoes to fill, but so it's good to meet you. But I also want to thank Bev for her many years of service with the board. You know, it's
Absolutely.
been terrific to get to know you. And I was thinking about the people who've had your job before. I think you might be, well, there was Diane and Mary and a couple of others before you. And every year it gets a lot more complicated and more difficult. And you did a great job for us. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
Yes,
well, we all say that to Bev, but you should know, Jeffrey, that she's, as you age, she's available for additional services for you at the Council on Aging.
John.
I might go over there. I like that building.
It's a nice building.
It's amazing. It's a tremendous amount of work, but work that I walked right into, that as busy it is, it's as gratifying. There's not many jobs you can go into that probably 98%, 99% of everyone you see is grateful.
Yeah.
That's something.
Yep, it is.
That's something.
Good for you.
And this is who I work with every day. And I'm very, very, very fortunate and blessed. And I did tell my dad just before he passed that I was applying for this job. So that alone, I don't know why I just shared that, but that it was just huge that I got huge. I'm gonna miss you. I'm gonna miss I'm gonna miss you a lot. That's all.
Thank you very much. The building over there is very beautiful, but the people are better than the building. So we won't let you get away from us, Bev. We'll pop in there every once in a while to see how you're doing.
And the board's hearings are open to the public, Bev. You can visit anytime.
Okay,
We'll
we're
even
going,
promote you.
You
Speaking of
know,
that-
I'm gonna stick
Speaking of
about,
that, is,
I'm gonna-
I'm sorry, go ahead, Bev.
no, I'll, as long as Crystal needs me. I mean, once, or as long as I can help. I'll be there.
Commissioner, on the, on the point about, the board's meetings are open to the public, are we intending to continue to do this virtually after April?
Good question.
It is a good question. I'm not sure.
We're gonna need to know
I
that.
know that they've talked about a live town meeting in May, so maybe we are going back. I'll start looking into that immediately tomorrow.
I think they gotta kick the statute out, don't they?
July is right now the deadline.
Oh, it's July. Okay, it's July. Okay.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Sorry, Judy. Oh, it's
That's
July.
all
Okay.
right. Oh, I
Alright.
track this carefully.
No, I'm sure you do.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
July?
yeah. I've been looking at
Oh,
it, but
it's
I haven't
April.
seen anything. What's the, I don't know, we don't have to talk about this, but
We
anyway.
don't know why they keep doing it incrementally, why they don't just fix it. It's very irritating. So the meeting that Sean went to, which I'm now going to, there's no Zoom link for. And it's just a shock to my system that I have to like leave a meeting. You know, as consultants, we've gotten used to being able to service a lot of clients because we weren't on the road. So I would encourage you, if you can, keep using your video conference
Oh,
capability.
yeah,
It's much better.
I think so.
Anyway,
Anyway,
I'm gonna go, guys.
Okay.
I gotta get on the road, but
All right,
thank you.
thank you.
and I'll,
Okay.
talk to the other consultants. I'll be in touch.
okay, great. Thanks, Judy. We're over to the
We'll
24th,
see you down the road.
7 o'clock.
bye.
Bye, guys. Night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Night, night, guys.
Good night.